Hey guys, Nicholai here, back at you with another kind of response video. This time it's to a topic that I decided to tweet about. I didn't want to throw somebody's Twitter handle out there to be kind of swarmed by people if this were to, for some reason, get a lot of attention. So I'm just writing my response here as my own tweet, and then I'm going to kind of talk about some of my thoughts about the Western Rite and some of the issues that I've seen over the time and years um, by various people that I know and people that I trust, including my own clergy, bishops, and things like that. I am not a biggest fan of how the Western Rite is currently operating. I think the this disjointed nature of it, having multiple different jurisdictions attempting multiple different ways of doing it, um, the at times lack of rigor compared to the Eastern Rite, some of the lack of certain prayers, akathis, and forms, which all inform us of core Orthodox theology. So the first issue that comes across with the Western Rite is that it oftentimes uh, is simply the standard that they're trying to go for is it's not heretical. So, oh, we'll use mostly the Book of Common Prayer and we'll just remove the overtly problematic elements. But that's not entirely how liturgies and worship services and the tradition of the church developed. The church developed these things over time expressly to encapsulate very specific things. They're trying to express certain theologies through form and praxis. And so when your goal is not heretical, rather than maximize the spiritual benefit and rigor of the praxis and the theology that expressed, you actually it begins to become lacking in certain ways. And there's numerous examples that clergy have gone over the time, and I'm not going to belabor that right now. But Father Peter Hears, his father was a priest who came in through the Western Rite and ran an Orthodox Western Rite parish initially. That fell through eventually, and that was it basically failed. Not failed in the sense that the Western Rite collapsed, but failed in the sense that they eventually moved out of it because they sought something deeper. And this is not to bash anybody who is in the Western Rite. I hope God grants them as much um, as they possibly can. But there is an issue here. And as I say here, as much as it annoys some people, the Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom is the standard rite of the Orthodox Church, and all other things are going to be compared to its rigor and form. There is a reason God allowed for most of the other rites in history to either fall into schism, heresy, or disuse. And this is completely true. The liturgy of St. James is not used actively on the average Sunday. There are a couple feast days or specific saint, um, like days of saints and feasts of saints, etc., that they'll sometimes use the liturgy of St. James in certain jurisdictions, and that is only maybe once or twice a year if they're lucky. The standard form of the church has been the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, period. There is not this, and so people that claim, oh, the Eastern Rite or Byzantine Rite isn't the standard of the church, that is just not true. The history of the church is a movement towards liturgical uniformity. There is no such thing as liturgical multiplicity as being the standard historically. What we see is that which, I mean, let's start with this. Do we really believe that the liturgy and how it develops over time and what liturgies are being used are not part of God's overall plan? Do we not think that some of these things fell out of disuse for a very specific reason? That God didn't intend for the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom to be the predominant one that's used across all of the people in the church established by Christ, namely the Orthodox Church? Does anyone really believe that that's not the case? And if it isn't the case, then you'll have to show where these liturgies did not fall out of fashion. Now, that's not even getting into another issue, and I want to discuss this issue I believe is actually very poignant. There is a major problem with internal and external unity within the church. We already have enough issues as it is trying to keep all the jurisdictions together. We have a priest shortage. Now what you're expecting is a lot of priests to suddenly learn an entire another form of worship, and we have to staff specifically for that. So now not only are we limiting the ability for priests to cover other priests, you're also stretching more thinly the available priest pool. It's a big issue. Then on top of that, you have the lay persons that are attending. Let's say they move, which is very common in today's society. They move, and the only available rite after that is the standard rite of the church. And then they start going, and now they're completely lost. They don't know what's going on, and it's a complete crapshoot for them. It's not a fun situation, and I know people that have been involved in that. In fact, many of them, I have seen that. There are a lot of people who came into the church via the Western Rite and famously are not fans of it anymore. There is a reason for this. And the reason is that the rigor, the spiritual rigor, the praxis is important. This is why there is a controversy about pews. My goodness, people think, oh, pews is such a silly issue to get hung up on. No. The reason pews is an important issue is because it changes the flow of the liturgy, let alone changing the entire liturgy. Why? Because there's spiritual benefits to standing. There's spiritual benefits to being able to easily prostrate. There are spiritual benefits to the reason that we don't have pews. Laziness, for example, getting complacent. Your mind wanders when you don't have to focus on staying standing and focus on the front. Whereas with pews, it's very easy for people to just kind of get complacent and get lazy. They're not sitting at attention. When you enter in the military, I'll give an example. What are one of the first things you learn? You learn to stand at attention when in the presence of an officer. When you're in the presence of the King of Kings, why wouldn't we stand? That is one of the biggest problems with pews. Now let's take that and extrapolate it out to the entire orientation of the liturgy. When you look at a Western Rite parish, they're often there's not a lot of icons. I've seen a lot of parishes. They'll have maybe some on like individual things. There's no iconostasis. If you're lucky, you might get a road screen, which is the tradition of the West, by the way. Road screen was standard. So it's not gonna work to just simply deny that. Then we look at other aspects of this. A lot of them lack the robustness of the iconography that we see, and the vestments. There's a lot of meaning in the vestments that we use. There's a lot of meaning in the flow of the liturgy that expresses certain types of theology just by observing it. Whereas with the Western Rite, I've watched numerous services, so I don't want to hear people say, "Oh, you just haven't been to one. You got to go to one." I've been to Mass. I've been to Anglican services. There's not a huge meaningful difference between Western Rite and a standard Anglican service with a couple other things sprinkled in. There just isn't. And frankly, the Anglican service is there's a reason the Anglicans are dying out. It's not just because of lesbian bishops. It's because they've watered down their liturgy over the centuries, just like the Roman Catholics have watered down theirs. Since the late medieval era, their liturgy has not been meaningfully the same as the pre-Schism West. The pre-Schism West was much closer to the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom than you'd like to think. And there's a lot of great liturgical historians who have covered this. We're not talking about laypersons that looked up some stuff online. We're talking actual historians on this matter. Now, the Western Rite is blessed. The Western Rite is used and blessed by the hierarchs of two jurisdictions. An autonomous church and a jurisdiction. It's blessed in that sense. People can receive spiritual benefits. They can be received into the church through it. But the question is not, do we want to hold people to the minimum of what it means to be Orthodox, or are we going to hold people to the maximum? There is also, let's not ignore, that there have been numerous issues over time. We're not even going to get into the fact that there's been many Western Rite priests that have been interviewed on Roots of Orthodoxy that have said some very controversial statements that are not denounced immediately. Instead, the people denouncing them are Eastern Rite people saying this is ridiculous, this needs to be called out, yet the Western Rite people are almost always defending it. And if they're not defending it, they'll just kind of make excuses. Well, Eastern Rite does bad things too. Yeah, but no one's under the delusion that Eastern Rite accepts these things. That this isn't a extra. No, this is not a deviation of the Eastern Rite or the Byzantine Rite or the standard rite of the Church. I hate even using Eastern Rite or Byzantine Rite because it's the standard rite of the Church. It has been for many hundreds of years now, and the Western Rite is a very recent phenomenon. Again, this is not to denounce anybody who is Western Rite. This is not to denounce the Western Rite. This is me calling to the Western Rite to be in higher standards, hold itself up to higher standards. And I went into another video where I responded to Correct Truglia, and I gave some of my thoughts about some of the things the Western Rite can do to maybe hit a reset and reattempt this experiment in a way that is more healthy and done with agreement across jurisdictions so that there isn't any more liturgical diversity. Liturgical diversity causes problems. It causes schism. We see this with the Celtic Rite. We saw this with the Western Rite in France, which completely schismed and went into apostasy. We see this numerous times whenever other quote-unquote rites have been tried in modernity. They haven't panned out very well long-term. This Western Rite has lasted a little bit longer, but not with serious issues that have cropped up. So let's not pretend that that's not the case. Anyways, this is Nicholai I'm signing off. If you have your thoughts and you want to disagree, please comment below. I'm willing to hear it out. Comment, like, subscribe, all of that jazz. Share it. You know the drill, guys. So God bless. Have a lovely day.